Today we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the fact that Jesus is more than enough to change someone's life. He has more than enough. But although Jesus can change someone's life or their eternal destiny in an instant, a lot of times it takes us a little while to catch up to the fact that someone really has changed. We're going to be in Acts chapter 9 today, so if you have a Bible and want to grab it or open it up, you can pause and then come back when you get it. We're going to be reading Acts chapter 9, starting in verse 19, the second half, and moving through verse 30. Before we read that, I want to tell you what's happened up to this point. There was a Jewish leader whose name was Saul, and we know that he became the evangelist known as Paul. He had a Jewish name and a Roman name, and depending on who he was, he would either be called by his Jewish or Roman name. So his name is Saul here in Acts. He's still going by Saul. And he has been traveling around looking for followers of Jesus who he believed were heretics and were disrupting the Jewish way of life. And he had authority of the Jewish leaders to capture those people, put them in prison, and even kill some of them. So Saul had been traveling around doing this, and on his way to arrest some more followers of Jesus, he had their warrants with him. On his way to do that, Jesus encountered or stopped Saul in his tracks, literally, and told Saul that Saul was persecuting his followers, and he had an assignment for Saul. He told Saul to go to this man's house named Ananias. So Saul went there. God also visited Ananias in a dream and told him, "Hey, I'm sending somebody to you, Saul." Ananias panicked a little bit. He's like, "Are you sure, God? Because this guy's been killing us." So God confirmed, and Ananias obeyed God, met Saul, and taught him more about Jesus. So after Saul had been healed of his blindness, which he received on his way to arrest the followers of Jesus, after Saul had been healed, that's where we are going to start reading now. Saul has spent some time with the Christian or the follower of Jesus, Ananias, and now he is getting ready to start a new direction or a new venture in life. So Acts chapter 9, the second half of verse 19. Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. And those who heard him were astonished and asked, "Isn't he the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on this name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests?" Yet Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah. After many days had gone by, there was a conspiracy among the Jews to kill him, but Saul learned of their plan. Day and night they kept close watch on the city gates in order to kill him. But his followers took him by night and lowered him in a basket through an opening in the wall. When he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. Paul's had a change of heart, and we see two responses. We're going to finish reading verse 27 through 30 in just a minute. I thought it's interesting to see what the Jewish leaders did. Paul had been like their golden boy. Saul, same person, different name. Saul was a brilliant man. He was taught by the best Jewish teacher, and he was the top of his class. He was the golden boy of the Jewish leaders, and he had been doing a lot of work for them. But now, all of a sudden, the Jewish leaders hear that this man who had been working for them now was apparently working against them. So they went and listened and realized that Saul was teaching very powerful messages in the synagogue. And he did this day after day. And since they didn't have the biblical knowledge to stop him, or to refute him, actually, They weren't competent or were not capable of refuting Paul's argument because Paul was right. Jesus is the Messiah, and he proved it. And when they could not prove that Paul was wrong, their plan changed to kill him. They wanted to silence him. I think it's very interesting that when the Jewish group of people, and really you can put any group of people in here, right now we're talking about the corrupt Jewish leaders. They weren't all corrupt, but these Jewish leaders that were corrupt, when they couldn't win the debate against Saul, they wanted to silence him. Well, if we can't defeat him, let's kill him. Let's cut off his voice. So much I want to say about that right now. If you've been keeping up on the news, see what's going on in our social media or the news outlets, that may hit a nerve with you. What do people do when they can't win a debate, but they hold power? Well, they just try to kill your voice. That's what the Jewish leaders wanted to do here. So they sent people out to kill Saul, but Saul had made some friends. They realized this guy's right. They hid Saul and then helped him escape the city at night. So Saul has now escaped from the people that used to be his friends, but he's no longer saying what they want him to say, so they want to kill him. He's now escaped for them, and he's headed toward the people that are his brothers and sisters in Christ. Let's read verses 27 through 30 and see how that goes. Verse 27. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. He told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord, and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. So Saul stayed with them and moved about freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. He talked and debated with the Hellenistic Jews, but they tried to kill him. When the believers learned of this, they took him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. Interesting thing happened. Saul fled from the Jewish leaders, but when he went to the followers of Jesus, those people that he claimed to be a part of now, they didn't believe him. And they had good reason. But he had one person there who took him under his wing, Barnabas, and vouched for him. And after the believers saw that they could trust, well, that's funny. After the believers saw, S-A-W, that they could trust Saul, then they began to allow him into the group. And he preached freely and had many converts. Then they shipped him off because they realized he's going to get killed. A couple interesting things come up out of this when I read this passage about the Jewish leaders and the followers of Jesus, how they treat Saul. The first thing I realize is that we've all encountered people like Saul in our lives. As a follower of Jesus, I have encountered people who used to be one thing and now claim to be another. And as a human, my tendency is to respond with, yeah, well, I'll wait and see, because I've seen this before. This is a normal tendency, and the reason that many of us respond this way is because we've been told this before. We've seen it before. People usually find Jesus, that's a common way of putting it, they find Jesus in a couple situations. When they get caught doing something illegal, or when their life's falling apart because of some form of addiction, and they realize they're about to lose everything, then they suddenly find Jesus. Across the board, that's one of those things that most of us could say, yeah, that happens a lot. We've seen that before. And our response to that is usually, well, we'll wait and see. Because people are all desperate and they just want some help when they feel like they're at the bottom of their lives. And what happens many times is once people start to feel some relief from that pressure, they also feel relief from the commitments that they made while they are under so much stress. So someone who was at the bottom of their life and made a commitment to live for God, well, if God will just get me out of this, no matter what, I'll commit my life to serving Him. I'm a changed man now. Once the pressure starts to lift, most people have that strong tug to go back to the old way of life, the way they used to be. And a lot of people who live for God consistently, year after year, we've seen that so many times, a natural tendency is to say, yeah, well, we'll see how he or she responds once things get a little bit better. Has the commitment really been made, or is it just an effort to get rid of the consequences of their actions? As a follower of Jesus, here's something I need to do. First thing I need to do is to ask God to give me wisdom. In Saul's case, when he first committed his life to live for God, God spoke to another follower of Jesus, Ananias. And Ananias obeyed God, but he asked God, "Are you sure?" He asked God for wisdom. And God confirmed. So Ananias obeyed. So when someone has come to us and they've found Jesus, and we know there's the potential for great harm, the first thing we should do is ask God for wisdom to give us guidance. And then, if God confirms, then we should obey God. We don't all get a voice from heaven. We don't all get some dream that we know is from God. But what God has very clearly told us we should do in the Bible is that we should be patient and we should be forgiving. The New Testament also tells us to be careful where we pour our water, what we put our oil into, the vessel. Be careful with the people that you pour your lives into, but be patient and be forgiving. So when someone is confessing or admitting to have a change in life as a follower of Jesus, what I need to do, even though I may have the first response of being skeptical or saying, yeah, well, we'll see, I've heard that before. I need to be patient, and I need to pray for them, ask God for guidance. From the opposite perspective, if I am that person who's recently had a change of heart, here's something that we should all keep in mind, is to realize that the reason people feel this way about me is because I've earned this reputation. I have a track record of making promises and not following through on them. So if I'm a new follower of Jesus and I want people to believe me, I'm like Saul. I used to hurt you, but now I want to be part of your family. If that's you, what you need to do is be patient and realize that people have memories and they have emotions. My responsibility as a new follower of Jesus is to be true, is to be faithful to who God has called me to be. And if people can see that I am growing and becoming more like Christ, they'll begin to trust me. That's what happened to Saul in the New Testament. And people are people. That's what they'll do. So if you're a new believer, don't forget that although people are children of God, they're still people. Give them some time. Remember that we're serving God anyway. I'm not serving these people. Whether they like me or not, I'm still going to live for God. As I was reading through this account of Saul, I thought, this is pretty relevant today to who we are. What's going on in our country, what's going on in our private lives. Are people really who they say they are now? Is everything instantly changed? I don't know. But I'm willing to be patient. I'm willing to pray. And I'm willing to let God work in people's lives. And I'm also willing to let God use me. If He wants to use me, I'm willing to let Him use me to be that key person, like Ananias or like Barnabas. that'll step in there and take a new follower of Jesus by my side and say, here, I'll go with you. That's the message for this week. Jesus is more than enough to change lives. We can be a part of God's work in people's lives. Look forward to seeing you again very soon, and I hope you have a good week.